The moon hung low and heavy over the hidden recesses of the crystal bazaar, its pale light filtering through the ever-shifting crystalline walls that composed the market's labyrinthian heart. Alara's footsteps, silent but resolute, echoed softly as she navigated the twisting corridors, guided by flickers of arcane light and the whispered legends of those who had come before her. Her journey had brought her here, to a place whispered of in the darkest corners of the bazaar, the sanctum of the Crystal Watchers. These guardians, she had learned, were the unseen eyes and ears that tracked the bazaar's ceaseless flow of forbidden commerce and magical relics. They were the keepers of balance, the only force standing between the market's seductive promises and its devastating consequences. The chamber she entered was unlike any other she had seen in the bazaar. The walls shimmered with a soft blue luminescence, casting an ethereal glow over the gathered figures seated around a massive orb that pulsed with light as though alive. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and ancient magic, a heady perfume that prickled her senses. A tall figure rose as Alara stepped forward, their robes catching stray beams of moonlight like facets of a gem. A crystalline mask obscured their face, leaving only eyes that glimmered with quiet intensity visible. "Welcome, traveler," the figure said in a voice both calm and commanding. "I am Seren, leader of the Crystal Watchers." Alara inclined her head, her heart pounding with a mixture of reverence and urgency. "I seek allies," she said, the words forming silently on her lips, then spoken aloud with a steadying breath. "The bazaar's dangers grow. I cannot face them alone." Seren's eyes softened with understanding. "You are not the first to come seeking aid, nor the last. But alliances here are fragile, forged in the crucible of trust and necessity." From the shadows stepped a wiry man, his fingers adorned with rings that hummed softly with arcane energy. "I am Kalen," he introduced himself, his eyes flicking over Illyra with sharp curiosity. "I read the currents of relic power, tracing their ripples through the bazaar's fabric." A woman with silver-streaked hair adjusted her spectacles and nodded. "Mira," she said simply, "I interpret the bargain's shifting clauses. The market's contracts are as alive and dangerous as the relics they bind." Together, they formed a circle around the glowing orb, which flickered and shifted, revealing images of distant corners of the bazaar and beyond. Dark shapes stirred in the shadows, forces that sought to exploit the bazaar's power for ruinous ends. Soren's voice lowered, heavy with foreboding. "The bazaar is changing. The bargains grow darker, the stakes higher. If left unchecked, the market's influence will spill beyond its hidden realm, threatening all worlds it touches." Ilara's gaze hardened. "Then we must act." Kalon extended a hand toward the orb, tracing glowing lines that represented the flow of magical energy. These relics pulse with power, but their energies are unstable. Each bargain sends ripples that echo through the market's crystalline walls. We watch and listen, but the threats are growing too great. Myra's voice was steady but urgent. "Many who enter the bazaar are unaware of the fine print. The bargains twist and turn, ensnaring souls in unexpected ways. If we do not intervene, more will be lost." Alara swallowed the lump of fear rising in her throat. The weight of her own lost voice pressed on her, a silent reminder of what was at stake. But here, among these watchers, she found a sliver of hope, a chance to turn the tide. Together, they began to weave plans, mapping the shifting corridors and plotting ways to counter the bazaar's encroaching darkness. The chamber hummed with renewed energy, a convergence of wills bound by a common purpose. As dawn approached, Alara stood with her new allies, the first rays of morning light threatening the bazaar's ephemeral presence. The crystal walls shimmered, fragile yet unyielding, mirroring Elara's own resolve. "We move forward," Seren declared. "The time to confront what lurks beneath the surface is near." Elara nodded, the ember of determination blazing within her. "For the voices lost, for the futures stolen, we will fight." The Crystal Watchers had opened their ranks to her, and with their guidance, Elara felt the stirrings of a rebellion that could reshape the fate of the Bazaar. Yet, beneath the hope lay the unspoken truth. Every action here came with a price. As the market's magic pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat, Elara knew that the coming nights would test her in ways she had never imagined. But armed with allies and purpose, she was ready to face the shadows and reclaim not only her voice, but the freedom of all who had been And somewhere deep within the crystalline labyrinth, the bazaar itself seemed to watch, waiting to see if the traveler and her watchers could withstand the storm gathering at its heart. The night was far from over, and the game was only just beginning. The heart of the Crystal Bazaar pulsed with an otherworldly light, a convergence of shimmering hues that twisted and danced like a living prism. Ilara's footsteps echoed softly on the crystalline floor, her breath steady despite the weight of countless Isem unseen. Others shimmering just beyond the veil, watching, waiting. The air was thick with the scent of ancient magic, a potent blend of ozone and something floral, faintly bittersweet. She stepped deeper into the core, where the murmurs of the market faded into a profound silence, broken only by the soft hum of power radiating from the glowing entity at the center. Before her floated the entity, an ever-shifting constellation of light and shadow that seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat. Its presence was both mesmerizing and terrifying. It was the living embodiment of the bazaar's power, the keeper of all bargains made and all debts owed. The entity's many voices whispered simultaneously, a chorus of promises and regrets, hopes and fears. Elara felt their weight pressing against her mind, urging her to speak, to bargain, to choose. At her side, the merchant emerged from the shadows like a wraith, his form cloaked in fabrics that flickered like the night sky, his eyes glinting with cold calculation. "You have come far, Elara," he said, voice smooth as silk, yet edged with something sharper. "But the final bargain is not for the faint of heart. What are you willing to offer in exchange for that which you desire most?" Elara met his gaze steadily, the memories of every step she'd taken in this shifting market flashing through her mind, the silence that had once imprisoned her, the faces of those she'd met and lost, the echo of bargains that had cost more than coin. She thought of her voice, stolen and yet still a part of her, a tether to her own sense of self. But beyond that, she thought of the others trapped by the bazaar's cruel bargains, their fates intertwined with hers. "I offer my freedom," she said quietly, "not just for myself, but for all bound by these chains." The merchant's smile was a slash of moonlight on dark waters, enigmatic and unsettling. "A noble sentiment," he said, "but freedom is a costly gift." From the shadows, Leora stepped forward, her silver-streaked hair catching the ambient light. She placed a steadying hand on Elara's arm, a silent gesture of alliance and courage. Their eyes locked, communicating without words the strength they drew from one another. The market around them seemed to breathe in response, the walls of crystal shimmering with newfound intensity. The entity's myriad voices rose in a crescendo, swirling around Elara like a tempest. "The bargain you propose is unprecedented," it intoned, "yet the cost must be balanced. What will you sacrifice to sever these bonds?" Elara swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down like the very night sky. She thought of her voice, the essence of her identity, the price she had already paid. But she also thought of the future, the possibility of a dawn where the bazaar's shadow no longer loomed over desperate souls. "I will give up my silence," she declared, "and in exchange, I offer to bind myself to the bazaar's fate, to carry the burden of its secrets so others need not." A hush fell over the chamber as the words settled into the air. The merchant's eyes gleamed with a mixture of respect and calculation. While the entity pulsed brighter, the swirling lights coalescing into a radiant orb. The bazaar seemed to tremble, the crystalline walls quivering as if in recognition of the gravity of this final pact. Suddenly, the market shuddered violently. Crystals fractured and reassembled, corridors twisted and reformed, and the very fabric of the bazaar's magic began to unravel and reweave itself. Ilara braced herself against the shifting ground, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. The sacrifice she had made was immense, but the possibility of liberation glimmered just beyond the chaos. As the light dimmed and the market's form stabilized, Ilara felt a whisper return to her lips, a sound she thought lost forever. It was faint, fragile, but unmistakably her own voice. Yet with it came a responsibility, a new path forged from the crucible of sacrifice and courage. The merchant inclined his head, a final, enigmatic gesture. "The game is not over, but you have changed its rules." Ilara looked toward the horizon where the first hints of dawn kissed the edges of the bazaar's fading light. The journey ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges and shadows yet unseen. But for the first time in what felt like an eternity, her voice was hers again, and with it, the power to shape her own fate and those of others bound by forbidden bargains. The final bargain had been struck, an echo that would resonate far beyond the Crystal Bazaar, heralding a new chapter of hope, sacrifice, and the enduring struggle for freedom. "This is just the beginning," Ilara whispered, her voice steady and clear, carrying the promise of midnight's resolve into the coming dawn. The crystalline heart of the bazaar pulsed before her, a beacon of impossible light amid shadow and shifting illusions. Ilara's breath caught in her chest, despite the silence that had become her constant companion. The market, with all its whispered promises and shattered dreams, waited for her next move. Here, at the core of forbidden commerce, stood the source of her torment and, maybe, her salvation. She fixed her gaze on the throne of ever-glowing crystal, its facets refracting a myriad of colors that danced like captive flames. Around it, the shadows writhed, as if alive, twisting through the stalls and corridors with a sinister grace. The enigmatic merchant's presence was palpable, though the figure itself remained cloaked in shimmering mystery. "You think you can defy the cycle?" The voice, when it came, was layered, echoing, as if spoken by countless tongues. The merchant stepped forward, the fractured crystal mask reflecting Eloros's determined eyes back at her, multiplied and distorted. Eloros's heart hammered, but her resolve was steel. She raised her hands, fingers trembling with the weight of magic she had barely begun to master. "I will end this. No more bargains that steal lives and voices. No more chains that bind the desperate. The Crystal Bazaar's cycle ends tonight." A cold laugh rippled through the air, a sound like cracking ice. "Foolish girl, the bazaar is eternal. It feeds on need and desire. Break the cycle, and you break yourself." Behind her, footsteps echoed. Lyran and Mira emerged from the labyrinthine shadows, their eyes bright with shared purpose. Lyran's voice was steady despite the tension. "We stand with you, Ilara. This ends now." Myra's hands rose, weaving invisible patterns that shimmered into threads of light, connecting with Ilara's own. Together, they began the ritual complex dance of magic and will that sought to undo centuries of binding power. The very air seemed to hum, saturated with the weight of countless bargains made and broken, lives lost and voices stolen. Fractures spread across the crystal throne, the mask of the merchant splintering to reveal a glimpse of the ancient force beneath a swirling storm of trapped voices and broken promises. The bazaar itself convulsed, stalls flickering like dying stars, corridors twisting and unraveling. Ilara's muscles burned with effort, but she pressed on, the threads of magic tightening, binding to the very essence of the bazaar's power. The chains of silence that had once bound her began to dissolve, shimmering dust falling like snow upon the crumbling ground. "This is not the end," the merchant warned, the voice now tinged with desperation. "The cycle may break, but the hunger remains." Ilara's eyes met theirs, fierce and unyielding. "Then we will be the ones to feed it differently, on hope, not despair." As the final strands of magic snapped free, the bazaar's glow dimmed, and the market began to fade like a waking dream. Ilara, Liran, and Mira stood amidst the ruins, breathless and changed. The cost was unknown, the future uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, the air felt lighter, the silence less oppressive. Ilara's fingers brushed her throat, searching for the echo of a voice reborn. The journey was far from over, but the cycle was broken, and with it the promise of freedom flickered bright in the moonlight. Yet, as the last shadows slipped away, a whisper lingered, an unspoken question in the night. What new bargains would dawn with the breaking of the old? The heart of the crystal bazaar pulsed dimly beneath the waning moonlight, its usual vibrancy now fragile, teetering on the edge of collapse. Ilara stood at its center, surrounded by the allies who had become her family in this shadowy realm: Kaelin, Mira, and Thorin. They formed a tight circle, their faces illuminated by the faint glow of fractured crystals strewn across the ground like scattered stars. The air was thick with anticipation, a heavy silence broken only by the quiet hum of latent magic. Ilara's gaze swept over her companions, each bearing the marks of their arduous journey, scars, weariness, but above all, an unyielding resolve. This night, they would attempt what many deemed impossible, to dismantle the bazaar's power through the sheer force of their united voices. Kaelin, the guardian of ancient sound magics, stepped forward, his silver-threaded cloak brushing the crystalline floor. "Our voices are more than mere sound," he intoned softly. "They are the essence of will, identity, and freedom. Together, our song can shatter the chains the bazaar has wrought." Myra nodded fiercely, her scarred hands clenched into fists. The market thrives on silence and secrecy, on bargains made in desperation. It fears our unity, it fears our voices. Thorin's steady presence anchored them all. "Then let us give it cause to tremble." Ilara inhaled deeply, summoning the courage to begin. Though her voice had been reclaimed only recently, it still felt fragile, a flickering flame against the howling winds of the bazaar's dark enchantments. She closed her eyes, reaching deep inside for the song that had been buried beneath years of silence. A single note escaped her lips, pure and trembling. Kaelin answered with a low chant, weaving ancient melodies into the fabric of the air. Myra's sharp, clear tones cut through the darkness like shards of glass, and Thorin added a deep, resonant hum that grounded their harmony. Their voices braided together, rising in a crescendo that echoed through the labyrinthine market. The crystalline structures that formed the bazaar responded, their surfaces vibrating, glowing faintly with prismatic light. The sound waves shimmered visibly, weaving through the stalls and corridors, a luminous tapestry of hope and defiance. But the bazaar was no passive victim. Shadows writhed and twisted, coalescing into tendrils that lashed out to silence the burgeoning chorus. The air thickened, cold and oppressive, as if the very market fought to preserve itself. Ilara's heart pounded as the tendrils neared, threatening to snuff out their song. Yet, the bonds forged in shared struggle held firm. Their voices wove a protective barrier, a shield of sound that repelled the darkness. Each note grew stronger, more vibrant, their unity transforming individual frailty into collective power. "Hold fast," Kalen urged, his voice steady amidst the chaos. "Our strength lies not in a single voice, but in the harmony we create." The chorus surged, their song a beacon piercing the bazaar's shadows. The crystalline walls cracked, glowing fissures spreading like veins of light. The market trembled, its magic unraveling thread by thread. Ilara felt a swelling joy mixed with bittersweet sorrow. This place, a nexus of forbidden bargains and lost hopes, was breaking apart. Yet it had shaped her, tested her resolve, and forged her purpose. As the first pale light of dawn seeped into the fading night, their voices soared in a final, triumphant crescendo. The radiant wave they released washed over the bazaar, dissolving its bindings and scattering its illusions like mist. Silence followed, pure and profound. The market was no more. Ilara opened her eyes, breathless but unbroken. Around her, her allies smiled, tears glinting like stars in the new light. They had faced darkness and emerged united, their voices a testament to resilience and hope. "This is not the end," Ilara whispered, her voice steady and clear. "It is the beginning of a new song." And with that promise, she stepped forward into a world forever changed, guided by the chorus of voices that would never again be silenced. The air trembled with a strange, crackling energy as the crystal bazaar began to unravel. Stalls that once shimmered with enchanting wares flickered like dying constellations, their magical glow sputtering and fading beneath the waning moon. The labyrinthine corridors, so familiar and yet ever shifting, now twisted unnaturally, shadows stretching and contorting in ways that defied logic. The very ground beneath Ilara's feet vibrated with a deep, resonant pulse, the heartbeat of a dying magic. Ilara stood at the heart of the market, the place she had come to know as both prison and battleground. The crystal entity loomed before her, its translucent facets refracting the moonlight into a kaleidoscope that danced with prismatic hues. Its form was elusive, shifting between humanoid outlines and abstract crystalline structures, embodying the enigmatic spirit that governed the bazaar's balance. The light around it flickered erratically, betraying the instability threatening its existence. "Why do you resist?" The entity's voice chimed, an otherworldly resonance that echoed in Ilara's mind rather than her ears. The bazaar was born to sustain the delicate equilibrium of desire and sacrifice. Without it, chaos will reign. Ilara met the refracted gaze of the entity with unwavering resolve. Equilibrium, it is a cage that binds us, all merchants, travelers, even you. The cycle of bargains, strips, voices, memories, and souls. It ends tonight. Before the entity could respond, a sudden presence manifested beside Ilara the merchant. The shroud of illusion that once cloaked him unraveled, revealing a figure far more complex and human than the enigmatic trader she had known. His face bore the lines of age and burden, his eyes a turbulent sea of pride and desperation. "You think you can end this?" he sneered, voice low and edged with bitterness. "The bazaar is eternal. It is not merely a place, but a force one that feeds on the desires of mortals and immortals alike." Then let it starve, Elara retorted, stepping forward, her gaze fierce and unyielding. The confrontation sparked a cascade of shimmering fractures throughout the market. Crystals embedded in the stalls cracked and splintered. Magical sigils etched in the air dissolved into wisps of smoke. The very essence of the bazaar's enchantment began to dissipate. The intricate web of bargains and bindings unraveling with each pulse. Allied travelers who had fought alongside Elara appeared, their faces etched with relief and apprehension. They too felt the shifting tides, their own bonds loosening as the market's fabric frayed. Yet, with freedom came uncertainty. The bazaar had been a source of power, danger, and survival. Its absence left a void. "We must leave," Elara urged, her voice now reclaimed and steady, "before the market vanishes entirely." The group navigated the collapsing labyrinth, passages shimmering and folding like waves caught in a storm. The scent of ozone hung heavy, mingled with the fading aroma of exotic spices and arcane metals. Echoes of whispered bargains and lost voices lingered like ghosts in the air. As they emerged into the pale light of dawn, the first rays of sun caressed the empty space where the Crystal Bazaar had been. The hidden market, with all its wonders and horrors, was no more. Elara inhaled deeply, the crisp morning air filling her lungs, a stark contrast to the stifling silence she had endured for so long. Though the bazaar was gone, its lessons and scars remained etched in her soul. The battle was won, but the future was uncharted, a new dawn for those who had dared to bargain with the impossible. Her gaze lifted to the horizon, determination burning bright. The promise she had made under the moonlight endured, to protect others from the seductive dangers of forbidden commerce, to ensure that the legacy of the Crystal Bazaar would be remembered not as a prison, but as a warning. And somewhere, deep within the fading echoes of shattered crystals and silent voices, a new chapter awaited. The lingering glow of the vanished bazaar played tricks on the eyes, as if remnants of its magic clung stubbornly to the waking world. Elara's footsteps were steady, yet her heart raced with the weight of what had been lost and what might yet be gained. Around her, the allied travelers shared quiet words, their voices a balm to the tension that still clung to the morning air. "Do you think it can truly be over?" a young man asked, his eyes reflecting both hope and fear. Elara looked back at the empty space where the bazaar had once thrummed with life. It must be, but endings are rarely clean. The cycle might be broken, but the world will remember. And so must we. The merchant's parting words echoed faintly in her mind, a reminder that some forces, once unleashed, could never be fully tamed. Yet Elara was no longer the voiceless traveler she had been. She was a beacon of change, a living testament to the power of choice and sacrifice. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows behind them as they stepped forward together, leaving the remnants of the Crystal Bazaar behind. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, it was theirs to choose. And beneath the fading stars, a silent vow took root within Elara's heart, promised to guard the fragile balance between desire and consequence, to be the voice for those still lost in the shadows of forbidden bargains. The bazaar's end was not just a conclusion, it was a beginning.